sweet girl, huh? We have a girlie with us today. We have a little girlie, huh? See, sweet lady. So, this is what I read in January, featuring Mother. Mother! The sofa's a bit messy because this is now her bed. She abandoned the cat room. She decided that she much prefers here. She spends all of her day in here, all of her night in here. She's happy. She's happy. She's my new foster, and she has a removed tail. So she had a tail amputation. That's why she's got the cone of shame. You okay? Is you good, girl? Is you good? Is this how we're gonna film? Are you going for a walk? Okay, bye! So, in January I read, oh. My fridge is growing out. I did the same thing as I do. Every January I realised this, I looked on my old pictures, and every December I decide that I'm gonna have a fringe, and then every like beginning of the year I'm growing it out. Lessons have not been learnt. It is what it is. So I read 3 books in January, and these are what the books are. So the first one I read was Intermezzo by Rooney. This book I struggled with a lot. So I got it in November, and it took me until now to finish it. It's not too long. It's, how many pages? It's 442 pages, but it wasn't necessarily the word count that I struggled with. It was like the sort of, it was the tone, it was the sort of lack of enthusiasm in it. Like, it was very like quite dry and to the point. There wasn't a lot of like emotion in it that I thought. I got this one, I was really interested because it was about like 2 brothers who their dad passes away, and I thought it would be talking about like their relationship, which it does, but like they're 2 different people, and it sort of explores of like how they like sort of go about life and stuff. But it's not really about grief, and it's not really about like how they deal with it. It very briefly touches the surface, and that's it. So it wasn't really what I expected. There were like elements that I really liked, like the sort of character of Ivan and how awkward he is. I feel like he kind of reads as like autistic, or like with autistic traits, because like he doesn't always understand people. He doesn't always understand like why people do what they do. He struggles with like understanding his own emotions, which I find really interesting. I love the beginning sentence. So that the beginning sentence was, "Didn't seem fair on the young lad, that suit at the funeral, with the braces on his teeth, the supreme discomfort of the adolescence." Like, that introduction was just so cool. Like, it really, like, that's what drew me in when I saw like that as the sort of marketing tagline. I was like, oh, that sounds like interesting, because it's like obviously like a younger boy who's just gone through like a big change in his life. Like, I wonder how like he's gonna be like dealing with it and stuff. I was very much envious of his brother, even though they're successful in different ways. So Ivan's like a chess champion, and like Peter's a lawyer. Like Ivan very much envies his brother's ability to just like socialize and just like he has girlfriends and stuff and is able to talk to people and just like order things from a restaurant. And there's like Ivan's very envious of that, and he almost like slightly resents his brother for that, I think. And that part was interesting to read. I didn't find the older brother as interesting as, like, compared to it. He was just a bit, like, I don't know, he just kind of stuck to it. Like, he was a lawyer and he's with, like, this girl, but he also, like, has an ex that he kind of wants to be with as well, and he's like, oh, you know, sort of, like, stepping all over them in a sense, but I get that was sort of like how he was set up. So like I think in a way you weren't supposed to like how he was, and you're not really supposed to be like, oh my god, I love this character. It's like Sally Rooney's thing is more like looking at humanity and how people like normal, like people just do things wrong, and people aren't all like entirely innocent and aren't entirely perfect. Like that is what life is, which she does really well. I just struggled with the sort of the pacing, I guess, with the book. Like it's quite slow, and at times the sentence structures pull you out of it. So it will be talking about like everything and what's happening and blah 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 does this, he takes a drink, and then it'll be like cold air rushes on his face, or like the sentence becomes reversed in a way. Yeah, like this one, cancels his meetings next day. Like it's just a very clunky sentence. Like why don't you just put he cancelled his meeting? Like cancelled his meeting next day. Takes a glass of water. Like who? Like, you know, like it just seems very like not the end. It doesn't match the rest of the writing, so then it's quite jarring and it pulls you out a bit, especially because it's so obvious. And it's like if you wrote the entire book in that, it would make sense, but like you've gone from going like, oh, Ivan puts his phone down, blah 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 blah, wind rushes, like it's a bit strange. And that just like I found that distracted me more than it did like enticed me. And again, like train in 10 minutes and he gets a ticket from the machine, but like the rest of it is written in like the present tense of, it would have made more sense to go like, oh, so and so gets the train, yeah, he gets the ticket. Like you don't have to like have it as a long sentence. But anyway, so it took me really long to read this. I wasn't overly satisfied with it. It wasn't really what I thought it was going to be. So it is what it is. The next book that I read was this one, which is The Cautious Traveller's Guide to the Wastelands. This one was amazing. I read this one and I think I finished it. I read it and finished it in Norway. So we went to Norway for a weekend away, and I took this as, I actually finished this one before I finished Intermezzo. So Intermezzo was a struggle, if there's anything to go by. I paused reading that and I finished this whole entire thing and then finished this one in like 2 or 3 days. I took this one on the plane and I read like a good chunk of it, read some of it when we were there, and then read the rest of it on the plane again. This one's like a fantasy, sort of historical fantasy. It's based on a train that runs from Asia to Russia. It goes all the way through without any stops. It's sort of like the most famous train, if the only one in this sort of fantasy realm that does this, and this is its last trip. So you're taking place with this sort of collection of strangers on the train. You switch between the different, like, not point of views, but like you switch between watching these different people, and on this last trip, and you find out why this is the last trip, and also about the Wastelands, which is what surrounds the trip. So the Wastelands which surround the train. So the Wastelands is sort of like portrayed as this own being in a way, like it's a setting, but it's also like people feel like it's its own life form. It's like you're not supposed to look at it out the windows, you aren't supposed to go out or even think about going out. You're not supposed to interact with the Wastelands. The Wastelands is its own thing. You travel through it, you do not go in it. And this sort of like has set up the entire thing for the story, where you've got a stranger who's investigating why her dad died and what happened before he died. You've got a child who was born on the train and grew up on the train and lives on the train, and sort of her like interactions with the train and like how she lives and almost is a part of it. And then you've got like the person who is researching the Wastelands. So like there's a man who wants to sort of investigate the Wastelands and is like a naturalist and stuff and wants to see what like things grow in it. So you've got like quite an eclectic bunch of people and all sat on this train where there's not really a lot of space. You've got like a map as well of the train here, so it shows like all the different places, and like obviously everyone's stuck on this train and you're on the last train and then something goes wrong. So without spoiling it, I won't go into more details, but I love this. I think the characters were so interesting, and I think that like each one was like really well formulated. Like each character had their own lives, each character interacted with the other characters and it made sense. Like they weren't there, they were all there for a reason, and their reasoning made sense. How they respond to like what happens on the train also aligns with their sort of character, which was so good. So yeah, this one was amazing. I think this one was my favourite of the month. The next book that I read, and the final book I read in January, was this one, which is Red Sauce, Brown Sauce. This one was a non-fiction book, but it sort of has the tone and the writing style of a fiction book. It's a travel log of Felicity, Cloake, who is the writer, and she sort of goes on this trip around the UK, and her whole thing is to explore the different breakfasts around the UK. So you've got her map of where she cycled around the UK, and all of the different chapters are the different places she went. So like number 1 is London to Exeter, and she looks at sauces. Number 2 is Exeter to Plymouth, and she looks at butter. So it's stuff like that. And like you've got traditional like English things that she's looking at, such as like baked beans. She looks at like the history of that and how like they make them. Marmite and Staffordshire oat cakes, looks at like the sort of like how they pair and stuff and the history behind it. You've got like she looks at black pudding and white pudding, so it talks about like the difference between them and like sort of the popularity. I really liked the one where she looks at marmalade, and it talks a bit about how marmalade came to be. So like oranges were shipped in from Sevilla and stuff, and like they used the oranges that were a bit more like sour to make the marmalade, and how it became popular and stuff. It was just really like, it's a nice balance of like food description, talking about like how the food tastes, talking about the history of it and the cultural importance, and like just talking about like how she navigates like all these places and like what she sees. So it's like a sort of like it's a travel log with like a bit of like grit behind it and a bit of history to sort of flavour the writing, which I really loved. And it was such like a nice light read. Like this would be lovely to read on holiday or like in the summer when it's warm. It's just so nice, and like the descriptions of the foods and the flavours was really good. Like she really like was able to make the food come to life in her writing, I think, and set the scene as well, which I like really appreciated. And yeah, I really enjoyed this book. It was just so nice. Yeah, so that is the final book that I read in January. So I read 3 books in January. I track all of my reading now on Storygraph, so if you're on Storygraph you can follow me on there and see what I'm reading at the moment. Yeah, so my goal for this year is to read 52 books, so a book every week. At the moment I am behind, but if I don't make it, I don't make it. It was just a little challenge I set for myself. I'm also on Instagram as well, where I post occasionally, like things I'm reading, things I'm making, things I'm doing. I also post pictures of the cats that I have. It will probably be mostly pictures of Baba. Follow me here to get more long versions of my content, and follow me on Storygraph if you want to see what I'm reading and what I have read before. But yeah, that is my wrap up for January. Hope you enjoyed.